Hello, we have a tutorial here. It's going to help you make concentric objects. I have a few examples that I did as demonstrations. Set of concentric squares, another set of concentric squares, and another one too. To make something like this, what you're going to need is a set of tools. You're going to need the square making tool you get by pressing M. You'll need the circle. You can make them as circles too, which you can make using the ellipse tool, which is L. And you will then also be pressing on a couple of keys as you do that to make sure the center remains the same as the previous object that you drew. So the important keys here are going to be the Alt key and the Shift key. Now, in order to regulate the space between the concentric rings or boxes, you're going to have to get your grid visible. So you do that by pressing the Command and apostrophe key. That'd be a Control key and apostrophe if you have a PC. So now I have my grid visible, and you can look roughly where the center would be, and that's where you can start. Now, the most important thing in order to get these things spaced out equally is that you have this feature called Snap to Grid turned on. That's under View and Snap to Grid. When you do that, these grid lines then control where the object will end as you're drawing it. So I'll show you one demonstration. I'm going to make a square. I'll draw from right here, holding the Shift and Alt key. You can see the cursor change when I do that. That means it's going to be a perfect square, and it means the center is going to be right where I started. Each time I move, you can see it jump to the next grid box. So we have a big black square and perfectly aligned with the grids. I'll zoom in, might show you. So you can see right here, this grid line and this grid line are the borders. Now, if you don't have Snap to Grid turned on, what you're going to get is your square, but it's going to end up being very fluid. You can watch it move kind of smoothly, which means you can stop in between the grid lines if you want. Neither one is the right thing. They just help you in different ways. If you want those grids to be your guide, then you want Snap to Grid. So you can see here that the edges are not aligned with any grid at all. I'll press Command 0 to get my full screen quickly. Now I'm going to turn on the Snap to Grid, and I'll begin by making some kind of square. Press the letter M, hold down the Alt and the Shift. Here is the first one. It's a little out of place. I'll reposition it. I might even enlarge it a little bit. Once I get the first one, you can see the center is visible right here. I'm going to go back to my marquee tool, hover over that center, hold the Shift and Alt. Now I'm drawing out a second one. And once I'm doing this, I'll stop right here. Here it's the same size. I go back, it's one grid box smaller. I'll stop at 2 grid boxes smaller. Now it's adopted the same color as the previous shape, but once I go over here and pick a new color, you can see the difference. I have drawn a second one. So I'm going to go back to the marquee tool or rectangle tool, I guess it is. Hover over the center, I'll draw out my third box. And right now I am again 2 grid squares smaller. It's adopted the same turquoise color, so I need to get that red-violet again. Here's where you'll use your eyedropper tool. If you press the letter I, that's the shortcut, it's going to sample the color, and it will put that color on whatever is the current selected object, which in this case is the smaller square. So there I have it. Smaller squares adopted the violet. It's easy to figure out what to do now. You continue drawing squares, and each time you need to press the letter I and make it adopt the new color. So you end up having a little system where you press M to get your marquee tool, You stop, you press I to get the eyedropper tool. You press M again to get the marquee tool, and you draw it out. Press I. So you're switching back and forth between M's and I's as you draw new shapes and then copy some color that you've used already. We can do all that with circles. Works in exactly the same way, and the grid lines are going to function in exactly the same way too. So I'll press L to get the ellipse tool, go to the approximate center here, and I'm going to draw out a big circle. I will draw out a second one, holding down Shift and Alt. And again, it's moving by the grid boxes, so now I'll make it bigger. Now I'm one grid box, one large grid box smaller. I'll choose a new color, press M to, I'll press L to get my ellipse tool, draw it out again, and stop when I'm one grid box smaller. And then I'm simply going to be switching back and forth between the ellipse tool, which is L, and the eyedropper tool, which is I, as I draw all these shapes. When you've done enough, you can stop and admire your work. I hope this helps you on your next project.